desk for you? Huh? Okay.
Definitely getting that.
Oh, thank you.
There might be ice cream.
Jared, when we don't have assigned seats. Food's in the kitchen. Fix yourself a plate. Nancy, can you hear us?
I think I'm gonna need that before we go. Sandwich just between two ladies. Get something to eat.
Nancy, can you hear us? Apologies for the delay. If you would like to do that while I try and figure out what's going on, sorry.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's on live stream.
Can she hear you or no? Can she hear us?
No, I just texted her and now
It
I'm
could be,
calling.
it could be on her end. She could hear.
Hey Nancy. I am trying to get you, can you see us? That's where we're having an issue, we're trying to, have you tried poking? I know. How do I share? Walk me through sharing. Share. Just get loud. We can see you, yes, we just can't hear you. Hang on. Eric set up the Zoom, and I had to use the ID and the thing in order to get into it. Can Nancy call, is there a caller number for the Zoom? Is there a caller number that is that?
Because I was having issues with my Zoom, like people couldn't hear me, and I have to call. Like I'd be on the computer on the screen, but I have to, in order for them to hear me, I have to be on the phone.
It's gotta be in Is there anybody else here that is really, really versed on audio and Zoom?
I'm not. Look, my knowledge went out with 8-track tapes.
See, now I can hear
Jeremy's the ID.
you guys talking into these microphones in the room here.
Yeah.
Can you hear us? Oh, we can hear
We
you.
got you.
Can you hear us? No. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
These are both, I don't think you're talking.
Okay. Okay, we're not getting much volume. Tell her to talk.
can you hear me?
Can you speak, Nancy?
I'm speaking, can you hear me? Hello, everybody? Can you hear me? I can hear.
Nancy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Close your Zoom.
Wait a minute. Keep up.
I can hear you.
Can you hear us good?
I can hear you fine.
All right, we can hear you better now.
Okay.
Say hello again, Nancy.
Say hello.
Can you hear me?
That's better.
I'll keep talking. I can hear you.
Can you close your Zoom and open it back up?
You want me to close my Zoom?
Yes.
And lock back in.
Come back in?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to leave the meeting and I'll go in again.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
She will. Once. Did everybody get food?
Okay, so I'm back in. Can you hear me? Let me I'm going to change my name on here so everyone knows who I am.
Can you try sharing your screen again?
Sure, give me 1 second. Change that. Okay. Share screen. Okay. Let's see.
I don't want to miss anything. Thank you, though.
All right, so I just shared my screen. You see it?
Hold on 1 second. Yeah.
Hey, Brian, is that back here, is that temporary friction putting up that 750? Gonna be, is it, because it looks like on the other side of 750, but they're doing work. Like a temporary bridge thing there, is that?
Nancy, can you talk more now?
Sure, can you hear me?
I think we're good.
Okay, and you can see the screen I'm sharing?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
got it, great, okay. Wonderful.
Can you zoom in, Jerry?
Nancy, can you zoom in to the agenda so it's a little bit larger?
Yes, tell me when.
Keep going.
That's good. That wasn't me.
Thank you.
Good?
Yep, I think.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay, so I am going to hide that. Okay. And tuck that down out of the way if I can. Okay, all right, are we ready to go?
Very much so.
Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So this is meeting number 23, and this is the second of the joint Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners meetings. Before we begin, I just want to apologize for my abrupt end to last month's meeting and running out of the meeting. I had a bit of what I thought was an emergency situation, and I had to scoot out of there, so I apologize for that. So tonight, what I had planned to do in terms of the agenda is to continue our review of the second full draft of the proposed zoning ordinance update and the maps. I have them available if we need to look at them. And if time permits and we get through the zoning, then we would continue on to look at the proposed amendments to the subdivision and land development ordinance. In terms of the zoning ordinance, I wanted to circle back to a couple of issues that came up at the last meeting where there was some more lengthy discussion, and that had to do with proposed conservation subdivision design standards. First, looking at getting some clarity on how that works in terms of density, adjusted tract area, figuring out the maximum number of dwelling units in open space, and the minimum lot size. And then also, with respect to conservation subdivision design, another issue that came up was how that relates to the recreation fee in lieu standards that are in the subdivision ordinance. So, I will, on topic 1A here, relating to that discussion, I prepared a map. So at the last meeting, we were talking about the conservation subdivision design standards, and the question came up as to whether or not, given the constraints in Pocono Township, whether or not those standards would actually work. And so there was a question as to whether the number of units that would be permitted in a conservation subdivision design development would actually fit on the site once you take out the constraints, such as steep slopes, wetlands, floodplains. And so I created a map, and let me zoom out here so this map is fully visible. I created a map to see what those constraints actually look like in the township. And so the conservation subdivision design ordinance, it requires that the applicant deducts from the development tract the 100-year floodplains, wetlands, lakes, and ponds, moderately steep slopes, which are slopes 15 to 25%, and then very steep slopes. Now, the floodplain is deducted at 100%, so all of the floodplain would be deducted, and that's shown on the map in the purple. The wetlands, lakes, and ponds are deducted at 95%. So you would take 95% of that out of your development area.
Hey Nancy, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
What do you mean by deduct?
So in order to calculate the number of dwelling units that would be permitted, you take the gross area of the development tract and you subtract all of the floodplains. 100% of the floodplains, that acreage gets subtracted out of the gross acreage. So you're basically going to end up with a net acreage, and that's your developable piece of property. Okay?
And what is it today?
Well, so today, a developer would have to kind of design, if you're doing conventional development, which is what you have today, the developer would design around the floodplains. Your floodplain ordinance, I suspect, does not permit building in the floodplain or restricts it quite severely. With wetlands, lakes, and ponds, it's basically the same. So you can't build on a lake or a pond. Wetlands, you can get permits to develop on wetlands, but ideally they're not developed, and they're not conducive to septic and so forth. And so in the conservation design standards, the wetlands, lakes, and floodplains, you would subtract 95% of that area out. So now you're netting that out. You're subtracting that from your gross tract area. With moderately steep slopes, the conservation subdivision design requires that the developer would subtract out 25% of the area that's in the moderately steep slopes. So you're not taking all of them out because it recognizes that you can build on moderately steep slopes, or have those moderately steep slopes be part of the lot area of a dwelling unit. And so you only deduct 25% of them. And then very steep slopes, it's 85%. So you're taking your gross tract area and you're reducing that area by subtracting out these features, these natural features, at the percentages that I described. And what you're left with is what is called the adjusted tract area. And that's your buildable area. And so, and this conservation subdivision design applies to properties in your R1, R2, and RD districts that are 12 acres of adjusted tract area or more. So it doesn't apply to every property, only to your larger properties, 12 acres or more. And so one of the concerns that was expressed by, I think, the township engineer and one or two of the commissioners at the last meeting was that there are so many of these constraints in the township that it would render the properties undevelopable. And so I created this map to show these constraints. And so you can see the floodplains. There are some real extensive areas of floodplains here on the eastern part of the township. I believe, though, that these properties are already preserved under conservation easement or some kind of preservation mechanism. So these are not developable anyway, I believe. And many of these other properties in here in your R1 and R2 and RD districts, much of those constraints are the moderately steep slopes, which you would only deduct 25% of those areas. And so if I turn off that layer, if I turn off that moderately steep slope layer, you can see the actual kind of impacts. So you have some very steep slope areas up here in the RD and floodplains, few in the light blue, the wetlands, lakes, and ponds. These have a higher level of, you subtract out more of these features. So it looks that like the constraints aren't as severe as we had first thought. Most of the constraints are in your conservation district, here in the recreation district around Camelback, conservation district here again where single family development isn't really an option. So that was something that, I just wanted to look into to get some more clarification as in terms of how much that would limit development.
Nancy, there was also a provision just to deduct 50% of your remaining lands before you started.
For open space. So that land does not get deducted. That would go into the open space. And so in terms of, these constraints that you see here and the deduction of 100% of the floodplain, 95% of the wetlands and so forth, this is for determining the number of dwelling units that are permitted. And so what I did to illustrate this, let me continue on here. And what, let me zoom in to try to clarify this more. So Natural Lands Trust, now called Natural Lands, that's the organization that developed this conservation subdivision design type of development. And so they provided me with this illustration here of how this actually plays out in terms of deducting the natural features and then including the open space, and how it affects or doesn't affect the number of dwelling units that a developer would be able to achieve.
Is that a federal standard or our local? That's not our local heritage.
This is what would be proposed in the ordinance, but this is just showing how that regardless of the amount of natural constraints on a tract, you would still be able to fit the number of homes that are permitted. And so I'll walk through this and explain this, and hopefully this will help to clarify that issue. So right now, your ordinance as it exists today, in your R1, your R2, and your RD districts where conservation design is proposed, it allows a developer to, under doing conventional subdivision, to the density, so to speak, is 1 dwelling unit per 2 acres. So a developer would take the development tract and design a subdivision plan using 2-acre minimum lot size, and they would have to, again, sort of design around the floodplains, design around the wetlands, the slopes, and so forth. And so let's say you have a 100-acre tract at 1 dwelling unit per 2-acre minimum lot size. Ideally, if that tract has no constraints on it at all, that developer would get somewhere around 50 dwelling units on there. He wouldn't get that many because you have to design the roads and so forth. So they get somewhere less than 50 homes. So if we look at, there are 3 different scenarios here in these columns. So great land for development is showing your gross tract area is 100 acres, constrained land is 0. So the next column over is saying good land for development. So let's say you have 100 acres gross tract area and only 10 acres of it is constrained. And we'll go through that. And then mediocre land, let's say you have 100 acres gross and 30 acres of it is constrained by steep slopes, floodplain, wetlands, etc. So what would the impact be? So with the conservation subdivision design, there are no floodplains, wetlands, steep slopes, so your adjusted tract area would still be 100 acres. We're not subtracting out any kind of natural features. The conservation subdivision design, as it's proposed in the newly proposed ordinance, uses the same 2-acre density that you have now. So we're not reducing the density at all for the developer. So you would realize, so that the developer would get 50 dwelling units. So 100 acres, and it's just simple, math. They don't have to design the plan at this point. It's just a calculation to figure out how many units they would be permitted. So you have 100 acres of adjusted tract area divided by 2 acres per lot, 2 acres per unit gives them 50 dwelling units. Now here is where Natural Lands calls it greenway land. We call it open space in your ordinance. So now 50% of it, as you said, it does, the proposed ordinance does require 50% of the remaining land to be set aside as open space. So in this case, you have 100 acres of adjusted tract area, 50 acres of that would be set aside as open space. That leaves you 50 acres available for development. And so you have 50 acres available for development. Under conservation subdivision design, you're allowed to have a smaller minimum lot area, and so you can fit the 50 acres, 50 homes on those 50 acres.
We really can't hear you, Nancy.
Oh, no.
There you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so in this scenario here, there are 50 acres available for development. So we have 50 acres set aside as open space, 50 of the 100 acres are available for development. We can fit, or the developer can fit these 50 homes on these 50 acres with a 1 acre minimum lot size.
But not including roads.
Not including roads, yeah. So with 1 acre lot sizes, now in the conservation design standards, it actually allows a smaller minimum lot size, ranging, so it can be with on-lot septic, it can be 30,000 square feet. So that gives the developer some wiggle room, so to speak, in order to fit the roads in and the 50 homes. So they could actually, so this is approximate lot size, 1 acre, 43,000 square feet. So given the roads that have to go in, maybe the lot size is down to, it might be 30,000 square foot lot sizes. Okay, so that I think the concern last month was we're not going to be able to fit those homes because the land in Pocono Township is very constrained, and throughout northeastern PA. But I think that this illustrates that the homes can fit. And experience in other townships that have this ordinance, that have these types of developments, they do fit. And there's actually, we can put something else into your ordinance that would, I think, give the developers another option to make this more viable. But to continue with this illustration here, so what this is showing is that now let's say in the second scenario you have 100 acres, 10 acres are constrained, so they're floodplains, steep slopes, wetlands. So we have to subtract those 10 acres out. So now you have 90 acres of adjusted tract area. And the density is 2 acres per unit. So 90 divided by 2 gives you 45 homes, dwelling units. The minimum, the minimum greenway land would be, yes, so the minimum greenway land is going to be it's 50% of the adjusted plus those natural features.
We lost your sound, Nancy.
Sorry. Can you?
Nancy, maybe a time, can you turn your camera off? That will take some of the bandwidth away and possibly. Now say something. Now say something.
Now, can you hear me?
No, that didn't fix it.
Did not fix it?
Turn off the mic. Turn off one of the mics.
All right, I am talking. Are you able to hear me?
No.
Barely, barely.
Let's see. All right. Is this any better? Can you hear me? Now I can't hear you.
Can you try muting your mic and then unmute?
Oh, she's unmuted. Yeah, that's why she's not, she's.
Now unmute it.
Okay, unmuted.
She's back. Okay.
Okay, you're good.
Okay, all right. Okay, so in this scenario, the second scenario, good land for development, so we have 45 acres available for development. The number of units that are permitted is 45. So again, even though there's some constrained land here, we can still fit the 45 homes on the 45 acres.
Nancy, I thought we had a 2-acre minimum here in the township. So where is the?
This will change it.
Oh, this will change it. Is that mean?
Well,
Is there going to?
No, so yeah, so you have a 2-acre minimum lot size for conventional development. So if you have 100 acres, you have 10 acres of constrained land.
I get that. But is this going to be an on-lot septic system, or is this going to be central sewage systems and central water?
So there are different. So this would be in any case.
Any case?
Yeah.
The reason why years ago they went to a 2-acre minimum is because of septic systems, you know, here in the township and also in the county. And where did these numbers come from? Is this from somebody else's ordinance outside of Pocono Township, or?
No. So we're using. So the density stays at 2 acres. So right now, your ordinance in the R1, R2, RD, it's a 2-acre minimum lot size. And so this uses that 2 acres as the density figure to figure out how many homes could be built. Now, those homes, so it's so to speak, giving the developer the same number of homes that he would achieve if he did conventional development. Roughly the same number that he would achieve if he did conventional development as if he did conservation subdivision design. So in that way, you're not taking anything from the developer in terms of the number of homes that they could achieve.
I have a question, Nancy. From my perspective, and I'm not a developer, but I can't see a developer going for this because you're giving away half their land, if not more, that they can't even use. And what does that do to our in lieu of fees? If we're telling them you have to set aside 50 acres that you don't use, not necessarily that the township gets to use, I don't see how we could get in lieu of fees on top of that. I mean,
Yeah, so that's another point of discussion. So if we can hold off on that, because that is something that we need to figure out. So if you don't mind, I think this is Ellen speaking.
Yes.
Can we hold off on that question for a second and address this one? But we will come back to that because that is on the agenda as item 1B as to how to address that recreation fee in lieu with respect to this. So not to belabor this, but so this third scenario here where mediocre land for development. So in this scenario, even more of the tract is constrained if you have 30 acres. You go through the numbers, the developer would get 35 homes, and the developable land would be 35 acres. So again, with a 1 acre minimum lot size, so yes, it's giving the developer the same number of homes, but those homes would be built on smaller lots. So that allows the developer to fit those same number of homes on the lot, on the tract, and have the open space available for that development. So that is what this is to illustrate. Again, because the concern, I think, one of the concerns last month was that a developer would not be able to fit. We're saying we're going to give you the same number of units that you would get even if you did conventional development. The concern was, well, we won't be able to fit those homes on the tract in this conservation subdivision design scenario. And this graphic here is to illustrate that they would in fact be able to fit those same number of homes. And that is because this is allowing a smaller lot size. So that's one thing to consider. Now, so is any feedback on that aspect of it?
for Pocono, I know you're, like the constrained land, I think our ratios are gonna be much bigger than what you have. We have, everything is a steep slope or a wetland, even though the map might not show it. When you get out there on the lot, that's what we're seeing. And I defer to the planning commission, isn't that what you're seeing? We're waiving steep slopes, we're waiving buffers. I mean, it's all over.
If anything, the constrained land should be part of the open space, not,
Yes.
not get to a number at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, right, all that stuff should qualify.
This is the exact same ordinance that just went out, that Stroud Township is trying to walk back right now. It went into Stroud in 2008, and they haven't had a housing development since, and they need help.
You're handicapping about 100 times the land.
Well, if you want to put septic and well on a acre lot.
We're not changing to a 1 acre.
So that's.
This is just an
This
example.
would change it.
So,
Yeah, this would, if this would change it to, this would change it to, so the minimum, the lot size could be 1 acre or smaller. And so, and even if we, did another 4th, 5th, 6th scenario where the lot is more constrained. You have 40 acres of constrained land, 50 acres, 60 acres, 70 acres. The numbers would still work out that you could fit the permitted number of homes on the tract, no matter how constrained it is, at a 1 acre lot size. So this conservation design ordinance would give you smaller lot sizes.
Not in the ordinance not in the proposed zoning ordinance update that I'm looking at.
It would, in the proposed zoning ordinance update, the conservation design standards allow for, as I said, I believe it's 30,000 square foot lot size.
Only if there's central sewage.
Right. No, I think with central sewage, I think it's 10, it could go as small as 10,000 with central sewage, I believe.
No, it's 30,000.
I think it's 30,000 with on lot, is it not?
Can you point us to a page?
I think it's page 210.
Let me see, page 210.
With neutral density.
Let me see if I can get it here on the screen.
So Nancy, under this conservation thing, could we make the constricted land part of the open space? Or-
Yes, so it would actually, so the constrained land actually is part of the open, so the constrained land would go into the open space plus 50% of the remaining land, so.
No, we want that to be part of the 50%, right?
Okay, so you could say the constrained land. I think what you would end up doing is reducing the open space requirement from 50%, because it's hard to know, from one tract to the next what the constrained land is going to be. I think the way we would have to write it would be to say, and I think we touched on this last month, is maybe instead of saying 50% open space, make it 40% or 30% or 25%. Your PRD ordinance requires 25% open space. So maybe we could say in the conservation design ordinance that it's the constrained land gets put into the open space, and then maybe, you do another 25% of what's left goes into the open space as well. And so that open space kind of buffers the constraints. And then also, that open space, some of it is used within the development area itself, so that there might be a small little green area amongst the neighborhood, some different green areas amongst the neighborhood, just to makes the neighborhoods very attractive and desirable. So that open space isn't a big area of open space. It can be smaller pockets within the development.
Now, this is a choice if they meet the criteria, because I don't really see a developer choosing this the way it is.
This would apply on tracts that are 12 acres of adjusted tract area or more, and the developer, this would be instead of doing a conventional lot out the whole tract, this is how that tract would develop. So it's not a choice. I'm still trying to scroll down and find this 30,000 square feet.
What's the density if it's multifamily?
Multifamily, let's see. Bear with me because let me see where multifamily is. Use regulations, R2, and RD, multifamily. To an RD.
So I found it on 213.
213. Thank you for that.
You don't have a density, but you have a maximum number of units attached in a row. It's all the way down to 4.
4?
Yeah. I think right now we're 8. I think PRD right now is 8, but there's not a max density per acre. Which I think right now there was no
Minimum individual lot area. There's no individual lot area. 4 units in a row for townhomes, multifamily. 4 units in a row for townhomes.
that's not the density.
No. Yeah, I have to look through to see what the density is for. Yeah, I'll have to check.
So right now in Pocono, a PRD is 5 per acre on your total tract. I mean,
5 per acre for PRD.
yeah.
So as I saw it on your PRD, it's 1 dwelling unit per acre
It was updated in 2023 or 2024.
to 5 dwelling units per acre.
And the impervious coverage was up to 35% overall. And it's overall if you're 100 acres, it's based on that, not
Mhm.
just the area. And this 4 is not. It's 8 right
Now-
now.
So on the PRD, let me ask you this: the updated 5 dwelling units per acre, is that for tracts that are 50 acres or more with public sewer and water?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Okay, so we'll look into that. So, let me make a note here for the conservation subdivision design.
Lost your voice, Nancy.
Nancy, we can't hear you again. Yeah.
All right, let me mute and mute again.
Now
Or
we're
mute.
We're-
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm making a note on the conservation subdivision design to check what the maximum density is for multifamily. Okay, so for the conservation design, is it, if it is, if we say that the open space, if we reduce the open space, is that a possibility? Or are you? What's the feeling?
So, I think what Ellen was saying, and we were discussing, was adding the constrained land as part of the open space, not reducing the open space, but adding it as part of the 50% versus separating it out.
Okay.
And at that point, you're okay with 50%. All part of the same.
The issue it falls into right now, you're setting aside so much for constrained land and then doing additional 50%.
Right, no, I agree.
Versus if the constrained land already has to be calculated in the developer's plans, that should be part of the 50%.
Yes.
And then what beyond? To get to a total of what?
That is 50%.
Well, what if it's not? So what if, the Nancy had up there scenario number one, let's say, it's a 100-acre piece of property. There is no constraint, which will never happen.
No.
But there's no constraint, you're still only developing 50 acres. So Pocono Township just took 50 acres from it.
Don't develop it.
Yeah, I know. That's what-
No,
We'll try
right, no,
to
right.
Stroud with this exact.
Well, here's the thing, though, just kind of like you said, there's actually there's no parcel in Pocono Township that would be zero.
Right.
All of them are gonna be 20, 30%
So
of constrained land.
I guess what's the number we want to get to then?
Well, here's the thing, if there's 100,000 acres and 20 or 30 are constrained, the way that this motto is you're taking 30% off, and then you're dividing the 70, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you're taking 30 off, you're only taking 20% more than for the open space. So you're taking 20 instead of the 35,
Yeah,
right?
so you're still only getting 50.
Yeah, so if I have a lake that spans half my property, will my lake equal that 50%? And then but then I'm gonna have the non-constraint adding to it, so you're gonna have less than 50%.
Right, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. So-
and I don't know that we really need, I mean, I'm all for open space,
Yeah, 100%. We're leaving 60 something.
and I would rather have open space than in lieu of fees myself. But 50 is, that's high, that's high.
We're doing 50%, or, yeah, over 50% and $150,000 in space.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that.
I mean, the majority of properties are gonna fall in that last category,
Mediocre.
the mediocre,
Yeah.
or worse, or worse.
So I figured that's what our best.
I heard you saying, the first two are never an option in Pocono Township.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. Maybe back in the 80s. It doesn't exist.
You know. I mean, you go up anywhere off the 611 or wetlands, all up there. Even if they're not on the maps, it's still.
So what is it, 25%?
For a PRD, it's 25%.
For everything else, standard development, it's not.
What is it?
There is none.
Well, there is, you get mixed use, so we're saying you don't set aside X.
That's what I'm down here flipping through all the different
So
ordinances.
there is some.
Which is.
And this is for every parcel over 12 acres.
Somebody can read it.
Agreed.
And are we looking for like a PRD?
No,
No.
I'm a lot. I'm a lot of field chairs.
No.
I
No.
don't think that we're severely restricting. As we proceed with this.
So again, you're not taking anything from the developer. The developer is still going to get the same number of homes that they would get, and even as if they did conventional development. The only difference is that the lot sizes are smaller. So instead of a 2-acre lot, you would, generally, they would have 1-acre lots. So you're not taking anything from the developer. Yes, in this case, we're saying 50% of the land plus the constrained lands go into the open space. But it's not taking any value from the developer in terms of the number of homes.
I think 25 to 30 space with the constraints. I don't know how.
Something has to be done.
Yeah.
If you're shooting for 50%, and you have constraints, those constraints go into the bank where you need 50% of the overall acres, right? And then if you're short a couple acres, that comes off of what you can develop. You got your 50%, you might have to cut off another 5 or 6 acres to get to your 50%. And it's done, right? That's left anything. Is that what we're trying to say? Your constrained land goes to your open space. So if you got 30 acres of constrained land, you got 100-acre lot, you need 50 acres of open space. So now you have 70 acres that you can fill up. You're going to get one. If you get to your 50%, you can another point. 50%.
But theoretically, on that last table,
Yeah, you get a little.
like you were just saying, but that would give you 50 acres on the bottom instead of 35. If you put the constrained land in the 50%, so you'd only take 20% more, so you'd actually have 50 acres. If constrained land was part of the open space.
That's what Kyle just said.
Yeah, minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, but that table is a perfect example, because you get, so you bump from 35 to 50.
And then if your constraint was 50 or more, you wouldn't need to do open space. Because that would be your open space.
Yeah, because it becomes your open space. You have so many things going on that need to be protected.
Like you said, if you have a lake that's half your property, you can't build a lake anyway, so the way it is now, you take that lake off, and then you still have to give half of what's left.
But for this, that lake is deducted.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what we're saying, that's what we're saying, is putting that as part of.
So right now, in the PRD, you don't have that magic of that 50% of your land, whether it's constrained or not. And I can only go back to ours. We have a lot of constraints because of the steep slope we couldn't touch it. So we could make our numbers work, but if we would have lost 50% of our land after the constraint, it's not gonna happen.
Correct. Yeah. The constraint needs to.
And so what that does then is promote sprawl. Because now I need to go to make that number, we need to go buy more land and develop more land. And again, this is what Stroud's trying to walk back. And if Pat were here, he's on the planning commission. I can tell you and it's the 50% number, the total number. If we get that down, right now it's 25% in PRD. If we get that down, plus your ponds and stuff, this board asserted that don't count, which we try to make the argument we did. But if you make that number, it's 25 right now, make that number 35, but give somebody the option, do it conventional PRD or do it this way. But make that number 35 or 40. 50 is just too much. You're spending $10,000 an acre, and then you lose half the property. And I'm not asking anybody to feel sorry for the developer. I'm not. But if it was your land, you would want that back.
But I think to have this conservation district, which we got the grant for, it has to be that way. I don't think there's any picking. Do I want this or this? If you qualify for this, this is what you get. Is that right, Nancy?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. For this conservation district, and if we had this in PRD, the developer couldn't pick, right? They would have to, if they qualified for the conservation, they'd have to do the conservation? Or is it a choice?
So the way that the proposed ordinance, as it's written now, PRD would not be an option. If you want to allow PRD to, so PRD would not be an option. The developer would have to do this conservation design. And again, the conservation design applies in the R1, R2, and RD districts. So in those districts, for properties that are 12 acres of adjusted tract area or more, the developer would have no choice but to do this conservation design. If you want to give them the option to do PRD, and I think, let's see, where PRD is, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong since that was updated. The PRD is permitted, is a conditional use in the R2 and RD districts, not in the R1. But if you wanted to allow PRD as an option, then, we could rewrite the proposed zoning ordinance that would say PRD is still a viable option. And so the developer would then have the choice of doing PRD or this conservation design. I think that they would choose. I don't think it would be much of a choice for the developer. I think that they would probably choose PRD every single time because they get a much higher density with the PRD. 5 dwelling units per acre rather than 2 dwelling units per acre.
It's only 5 in multifamily.
Okay, right.
There's no density in the conservation easement for multifamily.
So, now the intent for the conservation design is to kind of, is sort of a updated version of PRD, sort of, but if you wanted to provide an option, then yeah, like I said, we could do that. I don't know that, so right now, as far as I understand, PRD is not an option at all in your R1 district. And I don't know that you would want PRD in your R1 district. That's a large swath of the township, and to have such high density throughout most of the township would be a lot of housing and people. But if you do want that, then
Let's retweak this to what we want it to be.
Right, and the other thing though, why does this reside in zoning and not in salvo? So this would be fraught with variance, right? Because if it's in zoning, it's a variance. If it's in salvo, first of all, the PRD, every section of it gives relief right in the ordinance that the Board of Commissioners can grant 2 or 3 different things for each item in that ordinance. This would be variance from the zoning hearing board or anything that you want to change, or need to change, or thought you wanted to change, or whatever.
Leo, did you find how much a person has to set aside?
Yeah, it's in saldo. The set aside is in saldo. It's convoluted at best.
Yeah.
It's in saldo, it's convoluted at best. But it talks in terms of prime open space land, which is a defined term. But if you look at the calculation, I don't know how anyone does it, to be honest with you. I mean, because it's creative. It's not very clear in our existing ordinance. One of the things that is evident is it needs to be made much more clear. Whether or not PRD, the only way they get relief is if they request relief during the conditional use hearing, Brian, from the Board of Commissioners. Because PRDs are conditional uses. Okay?
And it specifies in the PRD under under almost every.
But you're looking, if there are certain things that you can do.
Exactly.
If you agree to do X, you can do Y.
Exactly.
It's typically how the PRD ordinance.
Because if you look back to the rehab, right, which is the only one I have experience with,
Mhm.
they set aside open space that met the criteria, so they did not have to pay any more fees. So there was a set criteria that they had to meet.
That was not a PRD.
That wasn't here.
No, but open space, I'm just talking about open space. And
The open space in the south though is that section that most developers ask to pay a fee and do it. That's the section.
if they don't have enough land or,
And they all do. No, I don't think that one put land aside.
no, because the campground one put land aside and this board was like, no, you're paying.
But that's the section.
So, and they did that to the Ridge also.
The
They
Ridge.
set it aside and you're gonna pay, and they very generously said they would pay, but they didn't have to pay. And that's
But
what I
then the
want.
payment was a negotiated payment.
It was.
It wasn't a per acre, you know,
Right,
you need,
but-
you need 100 acres of open space, we need 1,500 an acre. It's not that.
But I don't like that, right?
Well, these are all the things that need to be clarified in this
But
ordinance.
it was clarified when the rehab went through, and it went through, so there is a standard written, and I just wanna know what that is, was, how did that get calculated?
Gotta be the one section. There's only one section that talks about it.
What is that section?
It's in the,
Oh, is Seldo on Eco?
yes.
Yeah,
390.
section 390 is Selby.
58. You guys remember rehab, straight through, how that just,
I remember. It says,
We can never decide.
for non-residential, which would be the treatment center, it says, amount of non-residential common open space. If a non-residential subdivision or land development is required to develop common open space, it doesn't say that it in fact is, it says, if it is required to dedicate common open space, the following amounts of common open space shall be required unless revised by resolution of the Board of Commissioners. Percentage of total common open space that would meet the definition of prime open space. 0 to 25% would apply when the minimum percentage of development of the tract required to be dedicated to common open space is at 6%. 21 or 25% to 75% goes down to 4%. 75% to 100% goes down to 3%. You go to E-code 390-58.
yeah, I'm there.
It's a convoluted calculation of this.
That was for a.
That was for non-residential. Residential is
Residential's got a dwelling, per dwelling. or-
minimum required common open space per permitted dwelling unit. But it also has percentage of total required common open space that would meet the definition of prime open space.
Yeah, it's a dark one.
Yeah, that needs to be fixed.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I said. That's why I opened my comments. It's convoluted at best and needs to be addressed. Absolutely.
Because, I mean, you had solar field, how did that
continues. It's a convoluted mess. It's a convoluted mess.
Fix it, but this is just one aspect of it. We have to know what we want, in order to put it in there.
Correct. That's correct.
Right?
The board should know what they want.
This,
Planning commission put them in there?
no, this was just an example.
Well,
But the ratio came from the national, whoever developed the conservation plan.
That was back in 2016, if you notice the bottom.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
But the things that are, our specific ordinance is regular. I asked, at the last meeting for a written copy, but we don't have anything that, do you guys have? What's changed and everything highlighted? We don't have anything. I mean, you guys have spent a lot of time.
Oh, there was red lines, Nancy had red lines, right?
Yeah, so you should have that. That's in,
We don't have red lines.
so I'm looking here. This whole zoning update draft 2 document. So this was sent for the last meeting. So let me just scroll up here. So here's the cover. Proposed zoning ordinance update, draft number 2, May 19th, 2025. So that's the latest draft. And this has all of the strikeouts, underlines for, so everything that's bold underlined is proposed new text. Everything that has the strikeout is existing text that's proposed to be deleted. So full draft number 2, date May 19th, 2025. This was in your,
Is that when you said, when did you email it to us?
so that was emailed in advance of the last meeting, which was.
Oh, that was the one, it was the link?
Yes, yeah. I had to send it through that mail big file.
That was the great big link file, okay.
Yeah, 'cause it's a big
I'm gonna,
bundle.
can you send that to me again so that I can get back into it and get everybody a copy?
Sure.
Christina,
Yeah.
don't, I have. So, yeah, we need copies, don't copy.
Okay.
But this-
Yeah, if you can send me that, Nancy, that way I can get this printed out for, all the members.
Okay. Yeah. I'll send it to
Do it as a
you
red line,
through that mail big file
yeah.
service again.
And
So
can you
you
do it
down-
so that it
download it.
shows up as a red line so that they know exactly what's
It is.
the changes are?
It is,
Colored?
it is, yes.
Okay,
When all this is done,
thank you, Nancy.
all
Yeah.
the developer's asking for is a clear set of rules. We don't have that.
Right.
We don't have that on many fronts. And when I just said to John and Amy, I don't know how they do their job, because when you submit a set of drawings, and then you get a letter back that's, I think the last one I saw the other day was 190 pages, 190 comments or something. And literally, there's different things, let's see, there's different parts of the ordinances that Amy and or John go through that say different things for the same, building road here, or put a curb there, but it's in 5 different sections, and sometimes they contradict each other. All anybody wants is to clear set rules, and this is a perfect opportunity, as I said before, to do that. I mean, the first township that I've ever been involved with that has a book that you can understand what you're doing, and it's the same for everybody. So if this is what, if we want to take away 50% of people's land, then we take away 50% of their land. That's the rules that you're going to develop. I think it's too much. I think if it's 30% and it includes the constrained areas, or even 40%, not 50. Right now it's 25 under PRD. And so that's another thing that there hasn't been a PRD since Northridge, if I'm not mistaken.
No, there's been two. There's been the Ridge,
Yeah.
but there's also been Coppelson. When I first started in 2014, Coppelson came in for a PRD. He was teeing it up for the Route 715 realignment. That's been used. Never come close to even proposing it. But it was as a PRD.
So before that, it's Northridge, which was in the 90s.
That's Serenity. Yeah, or they're part of it.
So if we need housing, what are we, all right, we're gonna go with this, we're gonna go with, whatever it is what the developers live with, 50%, 40%? And I think there also should be the flexibility within the ordinance that PRD, if we're replacing PRD, it gives the flexibility to the Board of Commissioners, that you're not sitting and meeting after meeting after meeting to try to do waivers or zoning hearings. The flexibility is built in.
And the planning commission knows too, like, the waivers that you almost get, they should just be rules, right? Like a lot of waivers for steep slopes or the NOAA stuff. Yeah. Or,
And for parking space.
yeah, you should.
Yeah, what it is.
The buffer trees, why are we gonna cut down the woods to put up new woods?
Right.
Right, so
Yeah.
why does that have to waste your time and our time? 2 boards have to approve that. Whereas it could just be flexibility. Hey, we're using the tree count, instead of cutting those trees down and putting up 6-foot trees instead of 100-year-old trees.
We always give them a waiver.
Yeah.
Rather than cut them down,
Right.
which makes sense.
Yeah, because what people don't understand, if we don't give those waivers, we're gonna sue everybody. They're gonna win in court.
Yeah.
And then local government becomes less and less relevant. Like they're trying to do with data centers.
So as far as the PRD and the conservation design, just so I have some direction on how to proceed. With the conservation design, I'm not actually sure, I have to think about how to write this so that it would, if I'm hearing you correctly, is to have the constrained land included in the open space and have the total amount of open space equal what, 50%, 30%, 40%?
I think 50 is too much.
Okay, so 30, 40?
30.
30%, okay. So 30% including the constrained land. And you would be okay, so if all of that open space turned out to be a lake, you're okay with that?
Yeah, why not? Let's swim.
Okay.
It's open space.
And then what if you had a lake and some very steep slopes and some wetlands, other constraints that would go beyond the 30%? You would be okay with those constrained lands not being protected in the open space?
You still can't build in a wetland.
Yeah.
Okay.
Over on street. And that's.
Yeah, I mean, so they would actually, they would end up being part of somebody's lot, you know? But I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying. And so,
I think if you buy the wrong property, that's your problem.
yeah.
You end up with 75% of your land constrained, that's your problem. I'm not interested in allowing people to build in the lake or on the lakes and ponds at 95%.
Yeah,
Does that include the entirety of the buffer that's in the 167, the stormwater ordinance, 167?
no, that would just be the actual wetland area itself.
Okay.
Does not include the buffer. So if your ordinance says you have the wetland and then it also requires a 100-foot buffer or 150-foot buffer, the buffer doesn't get subtracted, just the wetland area.
So they can end up with buffers on their lots that they still have to work around for the house itself.
Right?
Yep.
So you have to put a buffer on the line, you have to move the lot outside of the buffer?
I mean, the developer would have to design, that's how the developer would design the lot, however they would need to design it.
Well, the buffer's not in the wetlands, right? The buffer's not in the wetlands. There's other townships in Pennsylvania that they don't have buffers, correct, John?
Correct. So DEP, let's get, DEP does not have buffer.
Okay.
DEP has stream buffer.
Right.
No,
And we do too.
we have both.
Do we need both? I mean, we're,
I'm not going to do that.
I'm just throwing it out there. It seems like when they want to go into the buffer and they restore it, we basically have agreed to allow them.
Sometimes.
Yes.
Some of us.
I was willing to hold the cards on that and then have the ability to create the waiver.
And I think that we still do.
Yeah.
It's not included in this. Honestly, I think it would be easier to start with the PRD, Nancy, and convert that to the conservation rather than taking the conservation and try to work the flexibility from the PRD into it.
But the PRD gives such a higher amount of density. I mean, I think they're really two different things. The conservation design is really it's basically your conventional development that requires open space.
What?
Whereas PRD is a different animal.
What density are you referring to? Because I think regardless, I don't think we want to limit it to 4 units in a multifamily.
So the density of the PRD, as you said, is 5 dwelling units per acre.
For multifamily. I think it's still.
What about for single family? I can, I'll have to look it up, but.
I think it's not 2 acres, but.
I mean, and if that's the case, then, I mean, I would say if you're leaning toward PRD, then, I mean, I hate to say this after all the work that was done, would be to just go back to your using conventional development.
And I just
With
want
2 acre minimum lot
Nancy.
size in your R1, R2, RD, and then having PRD as an option.
Nancy, it's
Yeah.
Jeremy. I just want to go back to when we first began speaking about this at our BDC meetings, and it came out of a significant change, and Mike, you may have been there at the beginning of that conversation, where we were going, and I think Ellen, because we had all these conversations about these numbers and statistics and all of that, and Nancy, I think you had mentioned some of this was tied to some grant that drove some of the changes here. So,
Right.
yes, because we ended those conversations that I recall that a large number of that would have to be discussed with the Board of Commissioners at that time, because when we got to this detailed review of all of those requirements, we said, well, this isn't something that we can really make a recommendation on, because it has to be, in consultation with the Board of Commissioners. So I think that's where some of this is coming from. You're almost seeing some of these major changes for the first time, where us from the planning commission, we're aware of this and kind of understood where it was coming from, but I think that's because I don't want you guys to think we chose to, the planning commission decided, oh, we want to, make this significant change in the plan, and not really say anything. So that's kind of where I think, and it seems to be that there's a lot around this. So I guess, Nancy, I don't know what the requirements are with that grant and how we can meet what we want in what the grant requirements are.
I mean, the grant doesn't actually require the township to adopt this. So let me back up. The grant was specifically for this conservation subdivision design and natural resource protection. So there's, we touched on this at the last meeting. In the proposed zoning ordinance, Article 11 is natural resource protection. So that Article 11, natural resource protection, and the section on conservation subdivision design are partly funded by the grant. The grant does not require the township to adopt this. So the township has actually already satisfied the grant requirements. We submitted to the grant funding agency the final draft that the planning commission had reviewed, which was like the first draft of this. Submitted that to the grant agency. They approved it. I believe that they
So, Nancy,
reimburse the township for the money, but the township doesn't actually have to adopt.
So if I understand, the planning commission had to send a draft to the board of commissioners. The board of commissioners could send it back saying, change this, we don't want it, and that satisfies the grant. Or
Yes,
we want
that's
just
correct.
what it says. Okay.
Right.
And because I'm intrigued by Stroud Township wanting to make if we're trying to do what they already did and they're trying to undo it, it would probably make sense that we not go as far into that as they did and use them as an example of maybe not
Don't
going
take
that
my
far.
word for it, bring Pat in, he's on their planning commission, and he'd gladly come in. We're already doing everything there except taking away 50% of people's land.
Yeah.
We're already protecting the natural resources to the same exact level as this.
Even John Wakeman is listening for Stronger, there's John Supervisors. He is, and he's
Down here,
yeah.
Yeah, and he'll
And
be
he's
here
ours,
tomorrow night
he's
for
ours.
hearing.
So maybe we could call him John.
Yeah.
Yeah, John, 'cause he's going really deep diving into all this.
At the housing symposium, I had the conversation with two of their supervisors that are trying. We tried it on the Dietrich track, but we can't make the numbers work. And they asked, well, we went through this whole thing, if you didn't have to take away the 50%. But we're already protecting the resources at the exact same, John, correct me if I'm wrong, at the exact same levels.
Well, we have to protect a certain percentage of steep slopes. Now we put a restricted easement on them. I don't know what that number is. We certainly protect the wetlands. We go beyond what some ordinances require with our wetland buffers. We protect the streams and everything else.
John, can you turn on your mic?
I'm sorry. We do protect a lot of our natural resources. Our steep slopes, we do allow, I think we have to protect 65%. So we allow some percentage to be disturbed. Our wetlands, we go beyond some other township ordinances with our buffers. We certainly protect the streams. So we do a pretty good job of protecting. One thing we don't protect that some ordinances do are woodlands. We don't have any protection. We may want to consider that in the future. We know what happened to us up on top of the mountain.
So, John, the woodland protection is included now in the Article 11. So the updated natural resource protection standards in Article 11 of the proposed zoning ordinance include woodland protection standards.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah. So, so do you want to, so the way it's starting to look to me is that the conservation design, it sounds like you're not in favor of the conservation design standards. And so if we remove them from the proposed ordinance, what you would have is conventional development on in the R1, R2, RD, as you have it now, conventional, subdivision with 2 acre minimum lot size. And then PRD would be an option wherever PRD is permitted. And according to what I had looked at, the PRD is permitted in the R2, RD, and C districts as a conditional use. So it would be an option in those districts. It would not be an option in R1. In R1, you would have conventional subdivision and basically as it stands now in your ordinance.
Is there an easy way, the use of AI these days, to compare our saldo to our zoning and eliminate the contradictions? I'm willing to give it a shot, but I don't know if you all have the software to do it.
Well, would it make sense to have John review the zoning proposal against the saldo and then make the adjustments?
So we do have proposed amendments to the saldo. Those amendments were really to make sure that if we make these changes to the zoning, that there wouldn't be any conflicts with the saldo. So I'm not sure that it addresses all of the conflicts that you're seeing.
And we just made some more changes to zoning the other night. We're proposing more changes, so I guess we should get them to Nancy. Is it effective?
Yeah,
Leo's working on that.
We have to go before our planning commission too, right?
Yes. In Monroe County Planning Commission also.
Okay.
That's what I'd like to start is with John and Amy going through our existing and cleaning it up. So, I mean, they're the ones that spend weeks putting together a review letter. I agree.
I agree.
This would cut down some billing time for you, but it'd be easier to do when a project comes in.
I don't know that there's that many. There are a lot of duplicative comments. We will get, you were accurate when you said probably 5 comments are pointing to the same thing. That would be one thing that would be nice if we could, I don't know if we could eliminate that or not, I don't know how it comes up, but it would be nice if we could eliminate that, and that would reduce the size of the ordinance overall, and to your point, make it much easier to follow and read.
These set of rules that you can actually look in there and read before you decide if you're gonna buy this property or whatever.
I mean, the township ordinance is, its basic structure is pretty open. And then people
some of the time, yes.
because they don't want us to get caught in the end. And there comes a time with everyone, that's where you have to do some housekeeping. Take a good look at it.
But the other issue I see is that there are philosophical issues that are being raised. We're talking about one tonight. That's a philosophical issue. If you want to do the conservation land, then we can do it. If you don't want to do it, we should know that now, philosophically. We've added zoning districts. Do you agree with the addition of those zoning districts, where they're shown, and how many there are? That's not rubber hits the road, that's philosophy. So I think, Nance, I don't want to speak out of turn, and Rich, jump on me if I speak out of turn, but I think we need to have those philosophical issues addressed rather than go right into the weeds.
I agree.
If we just sat back and we discussed at 5 o'clock today, conservation land versus PRD, what does it mean? How, who's in favor of doing it one way versus the other way versus the hybrid versus whatever, then that gives direction to the planning commission, the board of commissioners, and Nancy as to how to proceed with this. I know early on when word filtered up over to the board of commissioners and the planning commission that they were adding a C1, a C2, and a C3, that was, what are they, what do they mean? That's the kind of conversations that get this thing out of neutral. I'm trying to think, open space. How much open space? Do we want to require open space? If we do, how much? What's the calculation? What's the fee in lieu of? The developer should know. If he comes and says, I want to offer 10 acres, but I want to do it by fee in lieu, then it's $1,500 an acre or whatever it is. You should be able to find it in the ordinance. But again, those are philosophical issues. So I think, Nancy, if you could develop a list of those issues to frame this, I think the task gets a little easier, not for Nancy or who's ever reviewing it, but to write the ordinance becomes a little easier rather than having the planning commission wrestle with these issues, come to us and say, nah, you know what? It doesn't, we're the governance, we're not so happy with that. So if we identify those issues, I think that would go a long way to get this process moving forward, and I would think relatively quick. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. I thought that's what we were doing last time.
I think with the, what they do with the commercial zone, I think the board would like that, because it's, the least favorite thing you like is in the C3, I think, so you try to, right, so they try to.
Oh, yeah, again, I'm not criticizing, this is, but we need to, I think we need to know that rather than start discussing C1, C2, C3. We need to say, look, here are 3 commercial districts, here's what the uses are proposed in each one, and here's where they're located. Are we okay with that? Yep. As to whether or not impervious coverage, we can get into those weeds, but I think we have to get over the first hurdle. And that is, are we okay with expanding our commercial district or breaking our commercial district up into 3 separate commercial districts? What do they mean? Where are they located? Why? Once we get that, the details, while there's devil in them, the details would be a lot easier to put together. I mean, look how much time we spent just on the conservation district, only to find out tonight that perhaps the board isn't in favor. There's probably 2 meetings at the planning commission level that could have been dedicated to something else. So, I mean, if we identify those philosophical changes that are made in this revision, and we know of 2 already, that is increased zoning districts, location of those zoning districts, the conservation land component of it, fee in lieu or open space requirements. That's another philosophical debate that we always have, whether it's with the developers and amongst the commissioners. And I'll put my 2 cents in, Nancy, but I think that would help move this process forward.
Well,
Okay, good, Lisa.
I think Nancy's already has something that the board and the planning commission can start looking at. She had provided the highlights of the proposed zoning updates, which kind of gives you an idea for each article what the changes are. it hit on the commercial zones and things of that nature, so maybe.
Well, let's get that out to everybody, then take a look at it.
Well, that'll be part of, I think, what Christine's going to provide, and also, we do have the list of the uses, the new schedule, so that would be helpful for everybody to kind of go through and see what we added to C1, C2, C3. So I think we already have a lot of that information available. We just have to get it circulated and make sure everybody gets it and look at it.
Lisa, thank you for that. I was going to bring that up as well. So yes, you do have a document. It should be showing on your screen right now the highlights of the proposed zoning updates. And so for each article, it goes through and just gives the basics as to what the proposed changes are. And so if you look, for example, Article 4, basic district regulations, that explains the different C districts. And so this, let me see, when this was distributed prior to the previous meeting. So this should be in the meeting packet that you had for our July meeting. I will resend this.
It is in that packet, so I think once Christine prints it out, everybody will have that information.
Yeah, okay.
So we want to move on to that discussion, the zoning map, or we don't have enough information? The rest of the board doesn't have the rest of the enough information. I've been looking at it now for 2 weeks. And I think the C2 is a little small. C3, I'm fine with. We're gonna get that, we're gonna have a problem on that 715 corridor if they pass that rule. And take the zoning out of our hands. The power's gonna go through there. And it's also, it's old style zoning. We're sticking with stuff we don't want down by the river. So there's gonna be impacts down there if anybody decides to build one of these things. I'm not suggesting we move warehouses anywhere else. I don't like the damn things either. C1 is intended for small scale uses. I looked through all the uses too. C2 is larger scale. And we cut that down to just near I-80. And then C3 is large scale stuff, warehouses, data centers, stuff like that. That hasn't changed. That's where the warehouse overlay was.
Warehouses are on industrial.
No.
Warehouse or C3. And industrial, but industrial is by the biggest role, so.
It's the overlay, right?
It's the
There's a
overlay.
Yeah.
difference between a warehouse and a distribution center. The distribution center are the great big warehouses that have a lot of truck traffic. A warehouse is a smaller,
Okay.
like Steele's Hardware has a little warehouse.
Okay.
To where they only have a couple of trucks coming in and out of there
All right.
to pick up just for his store.
Okay.
So there's a difference between the warehouse and a distribution center. And that's where people tend to get
The manufacturing.
confused with the way the districts are done and what's allowed within there. The warehouses are smaller. The distribution centers are the big thing, like up here on Warner Road.
Where is DC? That was the one that the board did years ago. Where's that been?
What's that over?
The DC, that's the data center overlay.
Yeah,
What is that?
Let me pull up the maps.
but it says. Yeah, I don't.
Data center overlay district.
Data center overlay district, so are you seeing a map on your screen now?
It's the checkered part down there. in D3.
checkered part in the C3 area. So it coincides with your enterprise
Yes.
overlay district, except for a couple of parcels. Your enterprise overlay district has one or two parcels up in this area along 611.
So,
Data center is just parts of the C3.
Chrisanne, to your point though, there's not a distribution center in our scheduled uses.
That's in your EPO district. I think it's called a trucking terminal.
So, what's it?
Well, that's what's
Oh,
going on
maybe.
Warner Road.
That's truck.
What was that?
That's what's going on Warner Road, a distribution center. It's not a warehouse.
Oh, the warehouse.
But we already defined that.
Yeah, it's called.
And the overlay. We defined that in the overlay.
Yeah, it's a trucking terminal.
It's called a trucking terminal. The distribution center, like that Chrisanne had described, is called a trucking terminal. And that's what your EPO overlay district addressed.
Okay, trucking terminal / distribution.
Right.
Yeah. DP overlay is what we're done for.
Yeah.
An EP overlay map.
Wasn't there something on the upper left corner too, way at the top?
Here's your EP overlay map. So this EP overlay district was created as part of that curative amendment.
Yeah.
So it's these blue checkered areas. So again, coincides largely with the C3 district, and then there are these other, I think, 2 parcels right up here.
And what's in the upper left corner?
And there was another one, oh shoot, sorry, that keeps flipping on me. There's another parcel here that's part of the EPO. If you can see where my cursor is circling around.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's right here.
Yeah.
I can't tell you where that is. It's just.
Nancy, wasn't there something in the upper left corner up in the mountains above the solar field?
For the EP district?
I hope that was like windmills or something.
No. So print that would be the wind energy. So you have a few overlay districts. There's the enterprise overlay district, which addressed the truck terminals / distribution centers. You have principal solar energy facility overlay, which addresses the current proposal for solar in the RD district, the 600 acres, and then, and then these other parcels here, again coinciding with the part of the C3 district. Then we have the principal wind energy overlay, and I think this is what you're referring to, Ellen, so we put it on the parcel that would accommodate the solar, and then this other parcel here above it.
So we're gonna have to.
That's all wooded, so what is our woodlands?
Well, we passed an ordinance that says you can't cut trees down quick, so we have to make that ordinance better. We talked about that last time with the planning commission. We have to make our wind and solar better as part of this. We passed something to try to get it so that nobody can cut trees down anymore, and it's not perfect, it was fast.
Right.
So we'd like your input. We kicked that around last time too, about restricting it to certain percentage of power over what they use, or no trees, and it has to be an existing impervious for solar, or on top of the building. And then we have to figure out the minute altogether.
So in the zoning, the proposed zoning update, there are sections that address wind and solar with all kinds of standards and regulations. And then in the proposed the newly proposed natural resource protection ordinance that addresses the woodland preservation. So it limits the amount of woodlands that could be cleared and disturbed, and also requires replacement of trees that are removed. So these things are in the proposed ordinance.
So we have to incorporate the stopgap with this. But I think ours was way strict. I mean, ours basically said you're not cutting a tree down for solar. So let's start there and then figure out where it can go.
So, back to the zoning map though, I agree. I share your concerns with the C one. I mean, there was the entire 611 corridor is C1,
Yeah, C2.
which is the most restrictive commercial zoning. So you can have doctor's offices and offices all along 611. And there's, towards the north section, there's quite a few larger parcels that are now gonna be, that are C1 restricted. What was that, yeah, but what was that? Oh, Dehaven's parcel. It's C1 now too. Huh? It was all C, so I think that was general commercial. Versus when you do C1, C2, C3, you do restrictions based on commercial conditions. So C1 is no restrictive. Hypothetically, yes. However, your C1 is limited to small businesses. So typically like offices and doctor's offices, stuff like that. So your 611 quarter, you restricted. I mean, some of them are. So I mean, like take for instance this parcel. I mean, it's this big on this little map, so you know what the decent size. So that's C1 now. So. I didn't see that. But you know what I'm saying? So you have quite a few large parcels here along 611 in the C1 zoning district. So you're severely restricting their land. No, that's fine. That's just my take on it. I would prefer C4, C2. C3 is kind of a free for all, so I'm not for C3. But what is our restrictions on multifamily in C1 zoning district? Okay.
Find the use table.
Okay, that might help too.
Okay, so on this use table, so this column here is showing your existing C district, and then this is what is proposed if it's split into the C1, C2, and C3. So the uses are listed alphabetically, and obviously P is permitted, C conditional use, and SE special exception. So you can see what is permitted in C1, C2, C3. And then in the standards for the districts, it would have the impervious cover limits and so forth.
And this chart too is what Leo was saying is philosophical. I think we should look at this also.
Yeah, I mean, if you just go through C1, 2, and 3, and are there any uses that are not permitted in C1 that are permitted in C2 that you'd rather move over and include in C1?
But there's also conditional use versus special exception.
Versus special exception, absolutely. Yes, correct.
That would be something we should review.
And you can see, for example, if we go down, so we're showing what you have in your C district now, which covers that entire swath of the 611 corridor. So, for example, if we go down here to, let's see, let me find an example. So, amusement arcades currently are permitted by special exception throughout that entire corridor. The change would be that amusement arcades are no longer permitted in C1, but they're permitted in C2, C3. So you can compare this gray existing commercial column with the newly proposed C1, C2, C3 to see how it would change. Follow what I'm saying? Yeah. Boarding houses are currently permitted throughout that whole entire corridor, whereas if you adopt the proposed ordinance, they would no longer be proposed in C1, but they would be in C2, C3, and so forth. Brew pubs, distillery pubs, urban wineries are new types of uses that are popping up. Your ordinance does not accommodate them currently, and the change would be that they would be permitted throughout C1, C2, C3.
Do you know, Nancy, we changed some zoning on several properties. Does this map reflect that change? We made some residentials commercial.
No, it does not yet, so I would have to get those changes from the township and incorporate them into the map.
Don't forget the game room. Salt trail, 200 acres. The game room there.
Yeah, so we just introduced a recreation to help them with that. So that they don't have to have a parking lot and the same as a commercial use would have to have. I think it's the, we did that for that and for equipment cars land for the mayor fund. They want us to take lands to make a parking lot and mayor like how many people can you put on? Right.
Where's the deck?
The big ones on the left. The big hill on the left, that whole one. All the,
It's usually more for this game.
No, in C3.
Is that right?
Is Chris Ann still here?
Yeah, she's making copies
Okay.
of the highlights.
Just wanted her to be able to pass that along to Nancy, the changes that we made. The commercial
I'll let
changes.
her know.
Is that right?
So. Serious?
So, as Leo was saying, on a broader philosophical question, I'm hearing at least one of the commissioners, I believe, saying that she would like to see more of the map as C2. So I think if we start with that bigger issue, but in order to get there, I think that you really have to examine the uses that are proposed and whether in the C1, C2, C3, and looking at the map, determine what your position is in terms of those districts. And I think that might require some time. I mean, this is a big table with a lot of uses in it. across these three proposed districts.
So except for the changes that we recently made, the commercial zone is still commercial, right? It's just a matter, we didn't change anything there, it's just a matter if it's 1, 2, or 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So it's just as big as it ever
Some
was.
significant changes to setbacks and impervious coverage. That'll be in, 470-20, that's eight copies of.
So no residential in the C3 zone.
Yes, I was just looking at. So, I mean, just a quick glance for me. In C1, the proposed change is no offices of plumbers, masons, carpenters, heating contractors, and similar trades, no vehicle service and repair facilities, and no veterinary clinic or animal hospitals.
You said C1?
In C1. So the veterinary office can be a special exception, but no vehicle service or repair facilities. It's a special exception in 2 and 3, and not allowed in 1. And then offices of plumbers, masons, carpenters, heating contractors, and similar is currently permitted, and the proposed is not allowed in C1.
And a reduction in impervious coverage from 80 to 60%. 40% being the maximum building coverage. That's a big deal, that, you know, so we should figure out, if a building's gonna be 40% of your lot, your minimum lot is 1 acre. If your building's 40% of that, it's what, 16,000 roughly square feet? Can you fit the parking with 60% impervious coverage? I counted out.
So then you have to scale down your building, right? You can't build something too big for you.
No, you're allowed to, you just can't fit your parking lot.
Well, then you can't, you can build it, but you
What's the
can't
point of
use it.
taking, what's the point of taking that away? We don't have an issue with it right now,
Taking one away.
the impervious coverage. Right now, it's 80, and it would fit. So we're gonna make, again, now we're gonna make things impossible that are possible right now. And we don't have an issue with it.
Don't we have an issue with impervious? Isn't that one of the?
No, you still have to control your, what, you still have to control your stormwater up to the, what do you have to convey? You have to convey up to the 100-year storm.
You took that as a 100-year storm into your stormwater management facilities.
So your post-construction runoff has to be less than your pre-construction runoff. So what difference does it make what your impervious coverage is? And you have to treat that water so that it's going, because it's going to a high quality cold water fishery in most instances in this town. So you have to cool it, and you have to infiltrate up to the 10-year.
So the difference is you,
Within 24 hours.
don't you, to cool it, don't you run it over grass or whatever? Right, so if you're all impervious, how do you cool it?
No, the time.
Your detention and retention facilities will cool. I mean, what you said is also true. I mean, there's different ways. There's more than one way to skin a cat. But detention facility, especially in your higher density commercial areas, for example, Wawa, they're all going underground now.
So for an example, at our old township building, back in the day when we had the drainage problem with the neighbor, and we said we put that retention basin in, but we said it had to run over the grass before it hits the stream, right? It couldn't, right? There had to be some kind of, it doesn't go right from the basin to the stream.
Well, that isn't a real good example because one, that basin was too small.
brand new development, all that would have been taken into consideration and designed appropriately. So you can discharge correctly into a stream if you retain the water long enough and demonstrated that you are in fact in the pool.
And taking chemicals out.
Right, and you have to infiltrate.
Doesn't the water have to be cold enough, or are you gonna ruin our cold water fish?
Yes. Yes.
But
by the
who's monitoring the temperature of that water as it goes in the stream?
It's all theoretical.
It's all theoretical.
So the fish are full of.
Because
I mean, the solar farm is
I would
theoretical too.
highly doubt that anybody in this room, except for John, could tell me what makes a high quality cold water fish. What's the criteria? What's the macro vertebrates? What's the temperature range and all that? That I can use that.
I don't need to know that, I
No.
just need to know that it
That
is.
they have got to meet that requirement
Right.
before you're gonna get approval, before you're gonna get an NPDES.
I'm just using the solar as an example. We all thought that was good until it rained, you know, so that was.
But I think that's unfair, Ellen. Yeah, it did rain, and they did have problems. They would have had a lot worse problems had they not had the controls in that they did have them. But I think once the vegetative cover, once they're done working there and it doesn't get built out, I believe everything will work okay and meet all criteria.
But in hindsight, right, because we have the benefit of that now, shouldn't they have had their grass growing before they moved on to build something more? So it could have been, we wouldn't have had that problem.
Yes.
Hindsight, 2020, right? But rather than saying clear 490 acres and we'll worry about.
Well, and the other thing too is the best cover is forest cover.
Right.
That is the best there is. So as soon as that's why I said earlier about you might want to consider protecting woodlands. As soon as you remove the forest, you have increased runoff, no matter what you plant. Right?
Well, maybe they should plant those 2 rows of trees we're supposed to plant now.
So again, you're gonna create sprawl by reducing impervious cover. Need more land to do the same project.
Or you need a smaller building, right? You might not need more
No.
land. Because like the warehouse on Winter Road,
Well, now C3 is 65%. I don't know what that 65 sounds low for a woman.
good catch. Nice.
So, I think C1 and C2 is too low. I really don't care about C3 because if they can never build another warehouse, they'll build another warehouse. But, again, let's go back to the fact that how much money we need in new revenue, one way or the other, in this township every single year when we're raising taxes. And that's whether you believe in growth or you don't believe in growth. Where's that money coming from? Or we have to start cutting, and where do we cut? We cut the police, we cut DPW, we cut the parks. What's C2? C2 cuts the impervious coverage from, is this C2?
C2 is showing on the screen.
Yep, no, it cuts it from
80% to 65.
Yeah.
And then C3
It's 65.
is 65.
So you're, and there's no,
What's the logic behind that, larger restrictions?
there's no, restriction on the lot, it's a 1 acre lot minimum, but no building coverage restriction.
The building isn't part of the impervious?
Well, in C1, it's called out, the maximum building coverage is 40%. In C2 and C3, there's no building. No buildings there.
Right, so in C1, the idea here, let me recall. In C1, the idea here was to have smaller scale uses. So that is accomplished by the maximum building coverage percentage.
Right.
So the C1 district is seen as sort of a transition area of commercial as you come into the center of the township, where you have the interchanges, the I-80 interchange and 715 and so forth. And so the C2 and C3, to allow for those larger scale uses, it does not have a restriction on the building coverage. That would be kind of included in with the impervious. And so the 65% would be building and parking. So yeah, I mean, it is in the C2, and then let's see, C3 was also 65% maximum impervious. So yeah, I mean, the idea again is in terms of the impervious, is just to reduce the amount of pavement and the impacts from that. If the commissioners feel that that is too restrictive, then we can increase those impervious coverages.
So let's just take.
So would you add them together, the building and the impervious, to get total impervious? Does the building?
For C2 and C3, yeah, so if you look at C2 is up on the screen now. For C2 on the screen now, maximum impervious coverage, 35% for residential, and that's typical for residential uses. I think the big question is other uses, which would be non-residential.
Yeah.
Going from currently in your C district, it's 80%, and yeah, so we're reducing that by 15%. That's pretty substantial reduction. So we either put it back to 80%, or if you want to minimize the amount of impervious, bring it down to, I would say 65% would be the lowest you want to go. For commercial districts, and typically for commercial districts, what I see in zoning is 60 to 65%. Now, in the case of Pocono Township here, where you have the interchanges and you have a pretty large commercial area and a rather small industrial area, you could go with a higher percentage of impervious in your C2 and C3. It's, again, kind of a philosophical issue as to whether or not you want those uses to be able to be larger.
I don't personally see the benefit of reducing those percentages this dramatically. I mean, if you're buying a parcel in C1 or a C2 zoning district, you're expecting to develop as much of the property as you possibly can to maximize it. You're paying a premium for commercial property as well. So I massive restrictions on it.
I think because your residential is mixed in with C more.
But that.
And they're also, like, if you look at the C3 area, that's in like the headwaters of the Broadhead, creek, and so all of Pocono Township has exceptional value and high quality streams, and so part of it is the environmental aspect. Part of it is that many communities are finding that they have high impervious cover allowances, and then they end up with much more pavement than they should have. So they're trying to pull back on the impervious coverage allowances. But again, it's Pocono Township's call as to how you want to go here.
You fix that by reducing the parking requirement.
And then you've got to dump the donuts where you're at in 611, right? And
Well,
Alger Avenue. That's
But
a
we're
negative.
overparked in some instances. The crossings is not, they're under. But we're ready to calculation, so.
I just don't understand the huge restriction on people's properties between the last review of that table and now that it just seems like we're just restricting the hell out of everyone's properties. For what reason?
Because we don't want tangible blacktop. Yes.
And I 100% agree with you on that. It's just, commercial property is different.
Commercial property is commercial for a reason.
Correct.
It's already 100% impervious along 611, right? Everything's paved.
Yeah.
Right?
And this would be different for housing, and I haven't even dug into that to see what would change if it was a commercial property being used for residential. It's way different. In the PRD, it's only 35% per. So I haven't got to the point.
I think if you look at the more recent development along 611, and when I say recent, Wendy's, Dairy Queen, even the Wawa, that's not wall-to-wall pavement. That's under our current ordinance. There's green there. It's all the pavement that you're seeing is from back when it was almost totally uncontrolled. And now the cars are actually parking in Pembroke Road right away on some of those
And we're going to put
properties.
sidewalks in too.
Right.
Take away their parking.
Right. Well,
It's the sins of the
It's great
past.
holiday.
You're gonna pay for the sins of the past by now making it too restrictive, and then you just don't have any. It's a balance. And again, we can say all we want about protecting the streams and the wetlands and everything else. That's what the conservation district does every single day with the rules for DEP that are enforced on these properties. And you 100% can. You're not introducing water in a rate faster or a temperature higher or with nutrients higher.
So Wawa,
And just,
Wawa has to be more than 80%, right? They only have strips of grass along the side, right? Where else is there
there
grass?
can't be more than 80%.
I don't know what it is, but they're not.
They're not more than 80.
Well, then they must be 80, because it's very, it wasn't pretty darn close to 80, yeah. I mean, they're allowed 80, right?
Well, they're not any currently.
Right?
Yep.
This would restrict it even more. These changes.
So do you want to go back to 80%? Do you want to go to 75%,
You guys have been
70%?
working on this for a year. What do you guys say?
Well, I know when we were discussing it, everyone had different viewpoints as we're going through this now. I mean, Ellen, I think, attended many of our sessions, and everybody got kind of a different view. But looking at it from different perspectives, I mean, at 65 might be too low based on conversations we're having now, and looking at what currently is being developed. I mean, just looking now, some townships, I think Paradise is at 50, Jackson Township's at 75, and Middlesmith was at 60. So even when we look around the local townships, it varies all over the place. So, if we're okay with what Wawa looks like, then I don't see a problem with raising that up.
Yeah.
Because we have something, because what'll happen too, if we lower this to 65, then somebody will just go for a variance and get the variance and go back to where it was. And if we haven't had issues with this particular number, then maybe it makes sense to not create an issue that will just result in a variance. Which I know in some of these things, when we're looking at special exception and conditional use, there was discussion about whether we wanted it to go to the zoning hearing board or the board of commissioners. And so there were specific discussions about which, when, where, and I think we mentioned at the planning commission that really has to be a discussion at the board of commissioners level as to where you felt those items would kind of end up.
It's my input on those conditional use.
If I could just make a quick comment too, a lot of the conversation also stemmed around what do you want Pocono Township to look like in the future? And so you'll see, and I don't know that we got to it yet, but you know, moving the parking more to the rear, having the buildings moving closer up, having, you know, sidewalks and walkability. So it was somewhat trying to create a vision of what you want Pocono to be in the future, not necessarily saying, well, we don't have a problem with it now, so I change it. Like, so that's a little bit of the thinking that was in those meetings, you know, do we want to have more green space? Do we want to have more outdoor dining, more walkability and sidewalks and things like that? So that's, you know, a little bit where the 65% came in, I think, to allow for some more greenery along the 611 corridor. But again, comes back to you as to what you would like to see.
And so that's the question.
And if you put sidewalks in, doesn't that need greenery? Is there a tree specification when you put the sidewalk in? Or are we gonna go right from the parking lot to the sidewalk and, like, Turkey Hill has nice landscaping, are they gonna have to get rid of that to put in the sidewalk?
The sidewalk is separate from the street tree requirement. Street tree requirement is driven by the length of the street frontage.
So we don't need trees on 611, and that's not a requirement.
It is.
Oh, it is.
That is street frontage. Yes,
And
the Lava did have some trees.
Lola does, yeah.
They did, okay, but it was good.
What they do.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't remember if they got a waiver, they had some issues.
Yes.
I think what we're gonna do is sidewalks, but we're
You
gonna-
see, that's the other issue. Turkey Hill does. We did that site work 20 years ago.
I know.
And now
Now
the power company cuts them down.
Yeah, but we're gonna put a sidewalk in, it's gonna ruin their landscape.
Well, we haven't seen the plan, I don't, we know.
Well, where else, unless the sidewalk's gonna be in the road.
And then you push, and then the roots grow and push the sidewalk up.
Right, right, I was just gonna say, comes up, some of these towns where the sidewalks are all, you know,
I don't think so at all.
and that's.
Makes the tree look like cell tower.
We need to stay on task, guys, because you're gonna be ending at 8 o'clock. We have action. Let's reel this back in.
Do you have a ruler down there?
Yes, I feel like I need one.
What do you guys think?
80%. If Wawa looks good, I think it's working. We'll just keep it there.
Well, whenever we had this conversation, it was always with the thought that, you know, we were going for next year, you know, for final approval and discussion.
Yeah, like, we all want to focus on nice things. But let's leave this warehouse at 65.
What if you go 70, 75%?
We're out of it.
Make it 50%.
And
Meet in the middle, between the 80 and
the unfortunate part is, we can make it what we want from this warehouse,
Yeah.
they're the ones that have enough money,
Yeah.
they're gonna sue for what they want.
Yeah.
So, but let them sue for 60, make it 61.
Sure.
Yeah, but I just don't like restrictions on all the rest of
I don't either.
the C district.
Yeah.
At all. I think it should stay the way it is.
Well, and I think though, we all seem to agree that we want to go to C1, 2, 3. So, I mean, at least I think we've gotten to that point, that we do want to have 3 different commercials. So I don't think it'll be an issue for us to iron out some of those numbers. And I don't think any of us as a planning commission will really tie into a particular number. I think that was based on conversation at a time that made sense with those that were in the room. But now with different viewpoints and looking at trying to forecast additional buildability in the future where we can kind of get more revenue, these are all things that you have to look at when we do these amendments. And this would be the time, because it's a massive undertaking to do this whole thing. And you guys are now coming into this fresh. So we kind of have to almost start again to bring you guys up to kind of the conversations that we had as well.
On that note, just throwing this out there, Jared asked me to ask everyone what you think about having this type of meeting twice a month instead of once a month. That would be including both board commissioner meetings, any zoning hearings, and planning commission meetings. So
I'm okay with that, because it's gotta get done.
But I think we need to really take a step back and look at what you have, because this took up so much time of just that we're all scattered and nobody's staying on task with any of it. So maybe I'll get everything out to you again tomorrow from what she sent. She emailed me, and kind of do your homework and really sit down and look through it. And Brian's been reading through it for what, how many weeks?
Well, we went through the same thing at the planning commission.
Yeah.
It was,
I will list your questions, write them down, email them to Nancy ahead of time, maybe she can get some of them answered prior to. Utilize Lisa and Amy, they were phenomenal and put so much input into these meetings with the planning commission, and Judy. But, I mean, there's a lot of in-depth discussions, the same as you're having tonight, and I wish we would have started out in the very beginning with both boards, but we didn't. So, let me know what your thoughts are for trying to figure out where to slip in another one a month. I mean, I know it's hard, and we're coming into a really crazy season right now too, so,
We're gonna ask John and Amy to do a dive into Saldo and compare with zoning and with these changes to see.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Nancy's gonna send a side by, or a red line side by side so that we can get that out.
Yeah.
And I think whatever we can do, this, the planning commission, I think we began a year and a half ago with this initial review, so I don't think we can spend another year and a half on this. So somehow we're gonna have to, get some summaries that will help guide the discussions, and I think if we can do those, get the red line version where it points out clearly what the changes are, then we can focus in on those specific items, because we don't have to really review the whole thing if we're okay with what was already there. But I mean, we had these same conversations, all of our meetings, Mike,
Yeah.
Mike and Ellen,
Yeah.
and then we would think we had something, and then another question would come up. So it's, I think, just the nature of the beast with this material.
Okay, so I will send out the materials to Chrisanne as soon as this meeting is over, via the Mailbig file server. So you'll get a download link, Chrisanne, and you can download the materials there. I'm going to send them as a zip file. There are a few documents included in the zip. And so, are we on the next steps then? Or when do we want, how do you want to proceed? When do you want to meet again? I assume you're going to need some time to review this material, the commissioners are.
Well, the next, if we stay with the once a month, the next meeting would be August 25th. I don't know if we all want to try and do a second meeting before that to at least give everyone some time to digest a little bit more of the material. If you're going to have it by this week, do we want to stick with the 25th and try and have more meetings maybe starting in September, or do we want to try that? I mean, August might be too soon to have another meeting.
I say the August 25th and then start in September.
Because that might at least give us some time to get schedules, and then Jared can check his schedules.
After Labor Day.
Yeah.
After Labor Day.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll stick with our August 25th, and then we'll.
So moved.
Okay, August 25th. Okay, so part of what I'm sending are the highlights of the proposed zoning updates. So again, that gives you basically a summary of the changes for each of the articles. And I'll also send the proposed maps, the zoning map itself, and then the overlay districts, and then the text of the zoning ordinance that shows what the changes are with strikeouts and highlights and, or strikeouts and underlines, and then also you'll have the proposed saldo amendments. And so the document with the saldo amendments, it's not the entire saldo document, it's just the sections that are proposed to be amended. So you'll get, I'll send those to you, Chris-Ann, in a zip file, and then that can be distributed to the commissioners.
Yeah, we'll close it up.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you.